And there's no better way to end an argument than when somebody's yelling at you and you're like, yeah, I agree with you. And they're like, what the fuck? Like, what do we do now? Like, how do we argue if he's agreeing with us?
Access denied. Access denied. Access denied.
Hey y'all, it's your host Jessica Jordan, and I'm here on Access Denied, the podcast dedicated to helping you get over your fear of rejection, one episode at a time. Let's go! Hey y'all, and welcome back to Access Denied. Today I am joined by the wonderful Crosson, who is the founder of the Second Chance Foundation and a content creator who very vulnerably shares about his life as a previously incarcerated person. I have learned so much from Jesse over the last several months that I've known him, and I am so incredibly honored to have interviewed him today. He has so many great little nuggets of wisdom to share with you all about overcoming adversity, building community, doing it scared, and giving yourself a second chance. You're not gonna wanna miss this episode, friends. Let's dive in. Jesse, welcome to Access Denied. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I gotta say, you and I just met each other, what was it, in August? Was that the DNC?
I think so.
And I have just so much enjoyed watching all of your content and following along on all of your travels. You have been all over the place lately.
I took off September 1st and I've had quite the adventure. I'm back in the kind of, I guess it's not my hometown anymore, but the place I started for a little downtime, and then I'm taking off again.
Oh my goodness. Where are you currently then?
So I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, and actually the place I'm staying has terrible Wi-Fi, so I had to call a friend up this morning and be like, hey, can I come over and use your house for Wi-Fi? Because otherwise I'm not going to be able to do this interview.
Oh, you're so dedicated. Thank you so much. The fact that you made time for this in the midst of all of your, adventures means the world to me. So thank you.
Of course. I mean, like you said, we met at the DNC. We had a great time and reached out, asked if you wanted to have a conversation. I was like, well, yeah, it's an excuse to hang out and talk, and this sounds good.
Amazing. I love to hear it. And can you tell everybody a little bit about you?
Sure. The reason that people know me on social media is because of my history, because just after my 18th birthday, I went to prison, committed a series of crimes around drugs and violence and all the terrible things you can imagine. And that was where I kind of had this metamorphosis. Like, that was the area where I turned from went through the cocoon process and became a different person. So much so that after 19 years, the governor granted me a conditional pardon, basically said, we're going to commute the rest of your sentence. We think you've done enough. And originally I was sentenced to twice the high point of the sentencing guidelines. There were all sorts of other circumstances, but it was kind of the validation of like, hey, you've done the work and you've changed, which I think is the whole point of the criminal justice system, or should be the whole point of the criminal justice system. And then just kind of got out in the middle of COVID with no idea what I was doing. Again, it was sudden. It was like literally an hour and a half's notice that I was getting out and didn't know what to do. And then someone told me, hey, you need to start making videos on social media, which one, I didn't understand what that meant because I hadn't had social media for 20 years. It didn't exist when I went in. And two, I just did whatever somebody told me because I didn't know how to make decisions. I didn't know how to direct my life because somebody had directed my life for so long. So I made my first video and it went viral. And then every day I would go to work and I would come home and I would make videos and answer comments. And that became my life. And it just kind of exploded into this thing that led me to speak nationally. I've got a book deal that's due in a few weeks. I've got, it started Second Chancer Foundation, started a nonprofit literally after a conversation at a party. Just been this amazing whirlwind of 3 years of building whatever all this is from just kind of total happenstance.
So let me just make sure I'm clear. This all started during COVID, so it's truly been 3-4 years.
Yeah, I got out August 16th of 2021, so I guess it's just after 3 years now.
Congratulations. You have built so much in that time. I'm very, I was already impressed by your story, and obviously we had a really good friendship while you were in Chicago and all of that. But I just feel like that is so impressive to build something so monumental, but also so impactful in 3 years. Well done. That's awesome.
Thank you. I mean, it's funny because actually we were talking pre-recording about Julie, and it's a YouTube channel that flew me and some other people out there for an episode where we were talking about people who'd been locked up. And there were a bunch of different stories and a bunch of different histories, but there were three of us who really kind of bonded because since we've gotten out, we've had this compulsion, we've had survivor's guilt for all the people we left behind. So we've kind of worked tirelessly to try to do things for others because we don't feel like we deserve it on one level. But also we've just been hungry for life. Every opportunity we've said yes to the point of, kind of wearing ourselves out and just being exhausted because we don't have the resources to maintain that. But I think there's a certain kind of archetype of people who come out of prison or really any institution who just are hungry for life. I've like, know we've missed out and want to have all the experiences and do all the things and help all the people. And it's really cool to meet people who are in that same place.
That's awesome. And I also love that, like, when you were talking about your story too, that you said, like, this is the point of the criminal justice system. It is like reform. It is kind of like all about that. And I think I see, obviously, like, you're doing so much work to speak out to that. I have learned so much from you about kind of what that life is like just in your videos alone. And I'm excited for you to share hopefully more today in our conversation. And yeah, I don't know. I'm very impressed, I guess, especially because you said social media wasn't a thing before you went in, and then to come out and like make it like a huge part of your career that's like the definition of what they told us as kids, that most of the jobs you'll have in the future don't even exist yet. Like
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I again, in the beginning, I didn't see it as a job. I mean, it's not my day job, but it is something that I realized all of the connections, all the opportunities, all of the funding, all of everything has come through it. So it's, I don't know how you define it. Like, it's the thing that makes the other things possible. It's the pre-job. I don't know, but it's definitely an experience. And you know how it is. It's wonderful. It's terrible. It's unifying. It's dividing. It's really kind of all those things.
Well, I always say that if you're like on the internet in any way, you don't just have one job. You have like 50 jobs, because as soon as you start becoming like a public voice, like, you're expected to be a speaker, you're expected to be a consultant, you're expected, like, there are so many expectations just thrust upon you in a lot of ways. And some of them are beautiful, don't get me wrong. It's like not a negative necessarily, but it's just something that at least I've experienced, and I think a lot of people in our space could probably attest to as well.
Yeah, and it's so kind of unintended, just the same way as I didn't intend to do this or be involved in this world. This has led to, I just sent an email for a guy who's like brilliant tech guy, ran stuff at Amazon, ran stuff at Microsoft, ran stuff at whatever, became interested in genomics, started this healthcare company, and was like, hey, I really want you to do our storytelling. Can you? And I was like, I don't know anything about oncology. I don't know, like, I'm not sure. He's like, I don't care. Like, you're good at this. We want you. And as you kind of talk about 50 jobs, like, there's no way to get from point A to point B other than the weird, crooked path of just like mystery.
100%. And those are sometimes the most fun too, the ones that like don't really align necessarily 100% with what you thought you were going to do. And then it comes out of the woodwork and you're like, oh, I could do that too. That's cool. It opens up your own like mind and like, I don't know. It's a fun time. Our jobs are fun in their own respective ways.
I was going to say, because that's, I mean, the thing we focus on in the nonprofit is connecting incarcerated people with mentors, because that was the most important thing for me. It wasn't a single service. It was someone helping me see myself in a different way, or see potential in myself that I didn't see before, or see a different place for me in the world. And if it hadn't been for those mentors or those people, I wouldn't be who I am today. So interestingly, it's I walk into that room and yeah, I don't belong in this room. There's no way. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, there is a place for me here, because somebody kind of like took my hand and led me through that door, or at least showed me where the door was to knock on it. And that's one of the things I focus on, because there are so many barriers or so many doors that aren't open to people with criminal records.
100%. And a big part of this podcast is about rejection. It's about being told no. And I'm curious a little bit about your journey once you got out. Like, did you feel like you had to kind of set your own path? Did you feel like you had to kind of like become your own boss in a way? Or was it something that you feel like was a choice?
I didn't really know. I knew there would be a lot of barriers, and that one way around that was to start my own company or start my own business or work for myself. I knew that was an option because I'd talked to guys who'd gotten out before. The other thing was I wasn't ready to be in charge of anything. I wasn't ready to be in charge of myself. I really just wanted somebody to tell me what to do. I could go do X, Y, and Z and then come home. And that was why the first couple jobs I had were just kind of menial jobs. I mean, I was doing like finished carpentry and not on a skilled level. I was just doing something that was right in front of me. And I actually was applying for a job with a big national nonprofit, because what I figured was I'm not ready to do my own thing, but what I can do is use my experience and lead with it. Because I feel like so often we have some kind of issue and we feel ashamed of it, or we're told we're supposed to feel ashamed of it. We're supposed to hide it. And so instead of that, I just led with that. I'm like, hey, I have lived experience. This is where I can work. This is where I can share my experience. This is where I can share my perspective. And that really opened a lot of doors that wouldn't have otherwise been open. But at that point, I was on the 6th round of interviews when I ended up having a conversation with this guy at a party, which led to, the founding of Second Chancer Foundation. And that was just like, it was the opportunity, and I wasn't going to say no. When somebody says, hey, I'm going to help you start this thing. Well, of course, I still say yes to everything, things that I don't need to say to, because for all those years, I couldn't say yes to anything. So it's kind of a matter of realizing that that was going to help, but also a matter of just, hey, it was a door, it was right in front of me, so I was going to walk through it.
Okay, I like that. When you say yes to everything, is that kind of like a mantra of yours that you've had since you got out?
Yes. And that has been good and been bad. I mean, I've ended up in some weird rooms with some weird people in some weird situations. But it's, for the most part, it's been good. I recognized again that, so often we're held back by fear. Like when I took off on this road trip, I mean, ever since I was a kid, I've wanted to get out of this town, like for family reasons, for personal reasons, and I was always afraid to. And kind of in a way, what I did was create a way to get out of this town by going to prison. And so I got out and I'm back here and I'm on probation and I'm kind of tied into the same forces. And I had to break away from some of those, but I wanted to get away, but I couldn't. And I kept justifying, well, I'm on probation, I can't do it. Or, well, I this, or, well, it's not responsible. And finally, when I got off probation, I got off August 16th of this year. And then September 1st, I gave up my lease and I just started driving. And it was kind of this like trust in myself for the first time. It wasn't like, I'm not going to have these safeguards here. I'm not going to have like people who can kind of like pick me back up if I fall. Like, I'm going to believe that somehow I'm going to get through this. Like, if I get a flat tire on the side of the road in the desert, I'll figure out a way to get through it. If I run out of money and I need to, work bartending shifts, I'll get through it. And it worked out better than I could have imagined. And I haven't even had to really rely on myself nearly as much because people have been so generous and so amazing and so welcoming. I ended up in a lot of spaces that I didn't expect to be in. That guy gave me the keys to his boat. He was just like, hey, if you're ever in LA, take this. I'm not using it. And I was like, what? Where am I?
That's a wild story. Did you take the boat?
I actually broke the boat, which makes me feel really bad.
Oh, no.
So he was trying to sell the boat. So in my mind, I was like, I'll go stay on it. It's in the marina. And it's just basically, it was a place to stay for free in LA. And I was going to go. And so one day the power just went out. I was using the stove and the power went out. And I called him. I was like, hey, man, I'm an electrician, but I've never used a boat with like AC or with DC with 12 volts. Just like, I don't know what's going on. We went back and forth. I tried replacing the cord. And then so I was trying to replace kind of the outlet that connects it to the shore power. And it was so old, basically, that like the screws wouldn't even come out and the wood was. And I was just like, bro, I will do this if you want, but I'm afraid I'm going to break your boat. Like, I don't know what to do. And so I'm stressing. I'm back in that childhood thing of like, I've broken something. Like, I'm not good enough. Like, nobody's going to love me, all this. And I leave. I don't even get to see him because I had to leave to go to a meeting. He gets there and he spends 5 minutes and the boat's fine. So I just spent like 2 days stressing myself to death about like this boat that was actually fine, that I just needed to clean the contact off or something I just didn't think of. Yeah, but other than the insane stress and the like sleeping and feeling like I'd done something horrible, it was a good experience.
Okay, well, that's typically how those things go. I feel like anytime that like something goes wrong and you're like, oh, this is so bad, you catastrophize, and then it's usually fine. It's usually almost always okay because nothing is ever that serious. Yeah. I'm glad they got it fixed though. Something that I want to go back to from your previous answer before the boat story is how we can often get in our own way and like that thing of fear, right? Because that is something that comes up in almost every episode of Access Denied. And I think that is something that deserves attention. And that's something that I like to focus on a lot because I do think that we reject ourselves first all the time. And I guess like in your journey, like how has that been? Because I know we had a really vulnerable conversation at the DNC as well about kind of imposter syndrome and that sort of situation as well. So I saying yes, being in all these rooms, having all of these opportunities, how does that play a role in your life right now?
I should put a chapter of the book that's called Doing It Scared, because it's imposter syndrome every time. Growing up, I always believed, or I was always taught, that you had to like know how to do it before you tried. And so I wouldn't do anything because I couldn't figure it out, or if I couldn't solve it, or if I could do it perfectly, or if I didn't know the rules, I would never step onto the field. And it kept me from ever doing the things that I wanted to do. Or if I didn't know how to answer every possible question, I wouldn't even try. I wouldn't apply for the job because I wouldn't think I would get it. And it just took this kind of mindset switch, which is still not instinctual. I still have to consciously say, I'm going to do this scared. I'm going to do this even if it doesn't work out. I'm going to apply even if I don't make it. In fact, I'm going to try to apply a lot. And so I did. I had to make the decision that I'm going to apply for every job that I want. I'm going to, kind of apply to go into every room that I want. I'm going to apply to speak at. Remember when I was putting in for these national HR conferences, do a thing on DEI for including formerly incarcerated people in the workforce. I felt like such an imposter, and I was getting these positive reviews back from the committees, and I was like, do they not know? I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But again, it's just, I did it, and I didn't even get most of those. It didn't matter though. It was really kind of the experience of trying and failing and trying and failing and accepting that like that didn't end my life. isn't terrible. It's okay to try and fail. Like, it's not the end of anything. And yeah, it kind of shifted to where I am. So as somebody told me, like, you just have to ask. Like, it'll work or it won't work, but you just have to ask. And so I try to have that mindset now and just go up and knock on all the doors I can. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm no longer trapped by that extra layer of like doubting myself or preventing myself from even going out there.
That's awesome. I think that that's something to like really, I hope everybody heard that like properly, that it's listening to this right now, because honestly, that is so important. Like knowing you have to do it scared. You have to do it scared. If there's anything that I have learned from this industry over the last several years, nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing. And that's okay. But you don't have to know what you're doing either. You can just show up. Showing up is truly half the problem, half the battle.
Yeah. It's interesting because one of the places that I really saw it is somehow through social media, I got tied into the tech world. So I met all these startup founders. I met all these like industry leaders. And every one of them says the same thing. Like, yeah, we just see a problem and we try to solve it. And we don't know, like maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. I do some storytelling for an investment firm or for a VC. And they understand that most of the businesses they invest in are going to fail. And they're not mad about that. They're like, yeah, we might invest in this guy knowing that this one's going to fail, but his next one's going to succeed. And it's just amazing to have that acceptance of failing. Whereas, again, growing up, I was told like failure is bad. Failure means you're doing something wrong. Failure is this. And I'm realizing it really is just a step in the process.
Well, they say that like, what was it? Thomas Edison made like 300 different light bulbs or something like that before he actually made the real light bulb. Like failure leads to innovation. It's such an important stepping stone. Without failure, we'll have no idea what doesn't work. And then we'll just continue to do things like half-assed or wrong or whatever it may be. So I welcome failure frequently. Because at least it's a direction, right? I hate being in that limbo state where you're still like trying to figure out, is this working? Is it not working? No, I like a hard, definite no. And I'm like, all right, that's good. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was watching your story in preparation for all of this. And one thing that stood out to me was how you got that like very high level sentencing, right? Like 32 years where you were only thinking it was going to be 10 max, right?
Yeah.
That is a huge blow. That's a whole, like, I can't imagine what you must have been thinking, especially so young. How did that, like, shape your experience when you were actually, like, incarcerated? Did that like, make you feel unmotivated? Did that make you feel like did it make you question your value? Like, what did that do for you?
Yeah, I mean, I very distinctly remember the moment that he read out the sentence and the whole scene. And it was this kind of split experience. Part of me was angry and saying this isn't fair and this isn't right and that's not what it was supposed to be and all those. And kind of the bigger part of me was that this was a validation of my deepest fear. For my entire life, I'd felt like I was worthless and irredeemable and I was meant for nothing. And it felt like this judge had seen that and like validated this person in this position of power who we hold up as like knowing better than anyone else had proven that my life was over and that I was worthless. And it was kind of a breaking point. And there was a breaking point where I went back to the jail and it hadn't really hit me yet. And I was listening to a song and it's kind of a full circle thing in my book. But I listened to the lyrics of the song and one of them is, when I die, bury me shallow so I can hear the rain. And that was like the snap for me where it was just like, yeah, my life is over. Like the most I can hope for is to like feel the rain through the dirt. But slowly over time, like I just wanted to do something and anything. And it wasn't about like changing or being better or learn. It wasn't about any of that. It was just like, I'm locked in a room with a bare wall. I need something to do. And part of it was wanting to help other people because I saw the people around me and the privilege that I had where even things as simple as mail call, like every single day that I was in that jail, maybe with a few exceptions, but I would get a letter or multiple letters, or I'd get a magazine or I'd get a book. And the people around me would line up and wouldn't get anything. And I think about the experience of that, of like, all you want is one person to reach out and say, hey, like, I'm thinking about you, or you're enough, or you're on my mind, or something. And to not get that day after day, and then to not get access to education, not get access to other things. And then so much so that the story that I like to tell about it is there was a guy who got to the first major prison about the same time I did. We were about the same age. I think he had a 30-year sentence, and I had a 32-year sentence. But the difference was the people we were around. Because everybody around me was saying, you need to get an education, you need to figure out the way to make the best of this, you need to like grow and learn and change. Everybody around him was saying, you've got a 30-year sentence, you need to make an example of somebody or somebody's going to make an example out of you. And so it's just this mindset shift. And about a year after we got there, he stabbed somebody up really bad over something stupid that didn't have anything to do with him, because everybody had built in his head that that was what he had to do, that that was what he needed to do to be okay in this place, that that was the only way he'd be safe or the only way that nobody would ever mess with him. It's just heartbreaking that the people we're around can shape our experience so completely and so profoundly that he and I were in very similar starting spots, but we ended up in totally different spots at the end.
Community really can like influence so much. And there's that famous quote that says the 5 people that you spend the most time with is like who you'll become or whatever. And I genuinely think that is one of the most true things ever, because we are a communal species. Like we value other people. And that's not to say that like, oh, well, we should be strong in our own willpower and our own selves. Like, yeah, but also we are community based. We care about other people. We have family and friends and acquaintances and all of these important relationships, and it makes such a difference. And I thank you for sharing that story, because I think it's important who you surround yourself with getting to where you want to be and getting through really massive blows to your journey, these barriers that we're talking about, like you having that community. I mean, you went on and you got a degree while you were incarcerated, didn't you?
I did. I wish I was wearing the sweatshirt. I went to a school that was all by correspondence, all by pen and paper, all by mail. And it took me 15 years because we couldn't pay for it. It just took time. But last week I was actually able to go to the campus of the university I graduated from for the first time ever, and was able to go speak to a bunch of student groups and meet with the dean of the program that I was in, meet with a bunch of like people from the university. It was amazing. But yeah, I mean, it's another one of those things where I'm sitting here and I understand the hopelessness because I felt it all the time. There were days I didn't want to get out of bed. There were days I didn't get out of bed. There were days like I just couldn't understand how it could happen. But at the same time, as I got through that, it was like, well, what am I going to do now? Well, I can sit here and stare at the wall, or I can do this coursework. And that was like, it was stimulating. It was engaging. It gave me something to do. It gave me some way to apply my energy that felt meaningful. And before that, I don't think I ever really had that. I mean, high school was not hard. I didn't really ever have anything where I could throw myself into. I hadn't found those things. The closest I came was I wrestled in high school. And that was just because it was like such a weird kind of shoddy program that nobody cared about. So I was like, well, if I do bad, nobody's going to care. I mean, I was one of the better people and I like smoked, and it was such kind of a joke at a hippie school. But it was a place that I learned to like do something that was hard and like get back up after I, got knocked down. But other than that, I don't think I've really had that experience. I hadn't found that place where I could push up outside of my comfort zone and grow rather than just giving up and going home.
I think that is so important. And I also appreciate that you said like how long it took you to finish the degree as well. I think a lot of us base a lot of our successes and failures on this preconceived timeline. And the reality is we're all on our own timelines, 100%. I know that's a cliche thing to say, but it's true. And so noting that like, hey, it's okay that this like is how things happened to, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's your journey, that's your experience. And also it's super cool that you were able to go to the campus and like meet with the dean and do all of that. Like, what a full circle moment in so many ways.
And it was really cool because I didn't even think about it. I was just going to show up and wander around campus. And a friend of mine used to work in admissions, and then another friend who, as a reporter, was like, no, you should call them. Like, they're going to be interested in this. And sure enough, like in a day and a half, they put together this entire tour and plans and meetings and student events, and because it was a big deal to them. Because, I mean, one, it's good PR for them. Like, they get to highlight this program they did. They get to use this success story. They get to, interview me or put me on the website as something, which I think is important. But also, they were just like, hey, this is kind of cool. Like, we've never had this happen before. Like, this is not a thing that happened. And just, it was really gratifying to be kind of like welcomed in and like no longer just kind of technically an alumni, but actually like given the alumni swag and taking on the alumni event and the tour. And it felt real in a way that it had never felt before.
Okay, so this sweatshirt is new that you were talking about before.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's so cool. I wonder, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe you'll give like a presentation there sometime. Like, I feel like that's...
They actually
very
asked if I would
possible.
come back and do a panel. And then when my book comes out next year, they said they'd be interested in doing a book signing and a presentation or a speaking engagement there. So that could be cool.
Look at you. That's so cool. See, that is proof right there that sometimes it just takes like a reaching out one time, because you never know what's going to happen.
I was talking to somebody when I was in Sacramento who had no idea, very little formal education, very little practice in the world, but just wanted to make an impact on the criminal legal system. And just started reaching out to people, to CEOs, to the leaders of nonprofits, to board members, to everybody, and got a surprising number of responses. Like, we were sitting there talking, and she was telling me the number she had on her phone. I was like, how do you have this billionaire's number in your phone? She's like, I don't know. I just sent a bunch of emails. And finally, he was like, all right, cool. I'm going to talk to you. Stop sending me emails. And it was just the tenacity to do that. And again, no training, no learning, just saying, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure out a way. I'm going to keep knocking on this door until it works. Like, she was an example of kind of what I think we could all benefit from, or what I could definitely benefit from, is not even necessarily having the best strategy, but just having the will to go through with it, whether the first strategy works or the 37th strategy works.
100%. I think that many people, myself very much included in this, like, part of this podcast has been very healing for me to like hear other people's tenacity and their like willfulness to achieve their goals and their dreams, because I have so much imposter syndrome. I do everything scared. And I think this idea that you just keep pushing, you just keep asking, being able to even in the first place ask for what you want or what you need or whatever. There's so much that goes into that. And, you know, as a disabled woman too, like the idea of asking for things, there's so much like burden interlaced with that, of course, too, and trauma from childhood that goes along with all of it. So point being, though, I think that is a good thing to hold on to, that you can't get anywhere unless you initiate the conversation, unless you ask for it. And sometimes it's going to take more than one. Like, a no does not always mean no.
Yeah. When, you know, it makes me think of the barriers that people face when they get out. You know, the two main things that we need to like succeed in life are a job and a place to live. And there are so many barriers around that. You know, so many places that will not hire somebody with a record, or will kind of passively find a way to not hire somebody with a record. And then housing, you know, because I was like, where I'm staying right now is actually where I was staying for about 6 months after I got out, where this woman just basically said, hey, I've got a little like mother-in-law unit behind my house, and I love your story, and I would love to see you be there, save some money, like get your life together. Which again, most people don't have that opportunity. But then my then girlfriend or fiance and I actually bought a house together. We moved in, and there were no barriers around that because they don't do a background check when you buy a house. But when we broke up and we both moved to town, you know, she got a place right away, and I just kept getting denials. Every place just either would say, hey, need not apply, you know, if you have a criminal record, or sorry, you haven't been selected, but we're happy to take your application fee. Over and over and over, to the point where it's like, well, what do we do? And so what it turned to was I just went on Facebook Marketplace, and I just started finding places and just reaching out. And I thought that people were going to do this like massive background check. I thought it was going to be the same thing it had been with the kind of like the major players. And so when I had reference letters, I had the two Commonwealth attorneys, or the two prosecutors for the county and the city, and I had the woman whose mother-in-law that I had lived in. I was like, this is pretty much proof. Like, if the prosecutors are willing to give me a chance. And it's so funny because the guy who actually rented to me, he was like, no, I just want to see your pay stub. I want to see your references. I don't do a background check. I don't do a credit check. And so I thought he was on this kind of mission of giving people second chances, and this mission of like believing in people like me. And almost a year later, I ended up having a conversation. I get a text from him out of the blue, and he's like, hey, I had no idea about your story. I just saw it on TV. Like, what the hell? Like, why didn't you tell me? And yeah, he was not intentionally giving me a second chance. He just didn't want to pay for the background check, or he didn't want to pay to do the credit check or do any of that. So it was like, it's so interesting how we create these things in our mind. And I had so many ways of like having a barrier of, oh, I shouldn't apply because he probably won't give me a chance. But I was just like, hey, I'm going to do everything I can as far as a plan. I'm going to get the prosecutor to support me, or like the chief of police who I talk to at the gym all the time. You know, I can get that, but after that, I just have to try, and maybe you'll say no, and maybe you'll say yes, but give me one of the best places I've had to live for, you know, the whole time I've been out.
You really seem like you have like this really strong head on your shoulders, like being able to like apply, even though you're already assuming what the outcome's going to be. That is hard to do, especially if you have like this no after no after no. Like, you can say all day long, like we can say all day long that a no just brings you closer to the yes, or like all these cliches. But like the reality is, when you're in it, it can feel really overwhelming. And so I guess, what do you do to kind of stay motivated when that happens? Because I'm sure, like, as a previously incarcerated person, like that is something that you deal with, maybe not every day, but like in some capacity, like frequently, right?
Yeah. Okay. I'd say there are two parts of that. One, like, all these like business influencers say the best thing you can do is work a salesman job. And I fully believe that's true. Get used to getting told no, get used to not having any outcome that you're looking for, get used to it being this process of like getting up and recognizing you might talk to 100 people and nobody's going to say yes. One, it's important to just get that kind of exposure and get used to it. Two, the thing that I found is that what makes a good salesperson is not selling something, but listening, like just talking to a person. Sorry, the dog is at my feet, shaking the computer around. Um, so it's not about selling. It's really just about listening. It's about finding out where somebody has a need, where there's some place you can help, where there's some place you can fit in. And I did that. I went to the General Assembly, our local legislature in the state of Virginia, to talk about a bunch of bills, to meet with a bunch of elected officials, to talk to a bunch of advocates, or talk to a bunch of advocates that were kind of opposed to things that I was supporting. And that's the number one thing I did is I sat down and said, hey, like, what can I understand? Like, what can you share with me? What can I better get? And we were able to kind of build coalitions or remove opposition to things just because we were willing to listen. As far as how I keep going when things get tough or how I stay optimistic, it's like I don't. I definitely have days still where I don't want to get out of bed. I still have days where I feel absolutely hopeless. I have days where I get up where I feel miserable. This road trip has been a really good example of that. 2 months on the road, and the first month I was probably just flying high the whole time. It's like, this is amazing. It's beautiful, and mountains and lakes and rivers. And then over the last month, it's been, alternative highs and lows of just like absolutely like hopeless moments. Like, why am I even here? I remember sitting on a couch. I got a super cheap hotel room. I'm just like sitting on this like ratty couch in the hotel room and just like not knowing what to do. And I was like, cool, I'm just going to wallow. And that's somebody taught me a long time ago. When I'm feeling that, I just got to be in it for a while, like maybe 15 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe a couple hours. Maybe I'm just going to wallow on this couch for 3 hours. But what I find is eventually, once I'm not resisting it and like giving it power by resisting it, I'm like, all right, I'm kind of tired of this. Like, I'm tired of feeling sorry for myself. Let's go do something else. So I think it's just really about feeling those feelings or feeling that kind of hopelessness or feeling that being lost. And once I feel it, it's like, okay, I'm done. Like, I've done my part. I'm the cloud that's passed by the sky and you can go on now. And that's just been instrumental in kind of allowing me to move forward even when I feel like crap.
Yes. So much yes to that. Feel your feelings. When I give like live presentations, sometimes I'll bring along this paper essentially that I call a rejection rescue kit, which will come back up in another bit of this in a little bit. But in it, essentially I call it a contract. You're basically giving yourself permission to fall apart. And you're writing out a plan for what that looks like. Like, what's your bare minimum of things that you're going to make sure you're doing every single day while you're miserable? Like, it can be just like getting out of bed. It can be changing into other pajamas. Like, it can be making a coffee. So like, at least you're caffeinated, like whatever it may be. And it includes like other things like reminders of your past things that you've accomplished. And it's things that you're not going to do to make sure that you're continuing to progress forward, even if you're stagnant for a minute. And the idea is to take that shame out of falling apart. It's you're not going to allow yourself to feel guilty because you've already written out what you're going to do. You're going to allow yourself to sit and stare at the wall for however much time you need without guilt, because that's what you need in order to build that bridge and like be able to move on. And that's such an important aspect of any sort of rejection, failure, whatever it may be, because we all have feelings wrapped up in the things that we are passionate about and that we care about. And when those get pulled back and when barriers get put in our way, like, you need the time to feel those feelings. So I'm really glad that you said that. And I also just want to highlight the idea of like putting yourself in a space to be told no in a lot of ways. It is a muscle. Being like, it's a resilience muscle. It's being able to build that up over time. And what I think when we met, you did such a really good job of listening to people's reasonings and stories and creating dialogue and discourse and conversation with myself and many other people that were in the circle at the time. And I just want to highlight, like, yeah, that is a really great way to kind of connect with people in a way that you understand then a little bit more. I think it builds an empathy, it builds an understanding. And I think that's really good. Really cool.
I feel like we're in a world where our natural impulse is to just wait for the other person to finish talking so we can say something. And it's really easy. It's like whether we want to or not, that's kind of the default that I think we're born to. What I found is that I don't enjoy that. There's no satisfaction. That's just like being in, kind of habit mode. I'm just going through and I'm just responding, and there's no openness. There's no learning. There's no actual exchange. And what I enjoy, like my number one thing in the world, is meeting people. And when I actually get myself out of that headspace and just start listening and asking questions and really being open, I find that, one, people often don't have anybody to be open with, or they don't feel comfortable being open. And giving them that is actually a really powerful thing. I know when somebody invites me to like share myself honestly and vulnerably, it's incredibly powerful. And I'm very grateful for that. So it's one of those things that we can do for other people that also is incredibly good for us. Like, it is just as good for me to have someone open up to me and feel that and feel the validation and feel the experience. And again, it's one of those powerful things we can do, and it's available all the time. Like, we can just meet somebody on the street. We can meet somebody at a coffee shop. We can go, walk our dog, whatever it is. And it's life-changing. And I think it's just a shame that we don't talk enough about holding space for other people or finding people who are willing and able to hold space for us.
100%. And, given the light of the last week of our time, like in the United States, there's been a lot of discourse about cutting people off that have different opinions from you. And, I'll be honest, like I've hit the unfollow and unfriend button quite a bit this week, but I also know those people. They're people I've known for years and I've seen their behavior over a certain amount of time. There's a difference between that and like encountering somebody in the wild and finding somebody that has a different viewpoint or a different perspective or a different lived experience or a different opinion and engaging with that and creating discourse and creating conversation. Because 90% of the time I would think that there would be some level of like connection. There would be some level of like crossover of thought and belief. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on all of that? Because I know it's been a week. It's been a week.
It's really easy to put people in boxes. It's really easy to assume something about somebody based on their political affiliation or what church they go to or what, belief or flag they fly. And what I found is that nobody, not a single person that I've met is just one thing. I found people who I may disagree with politically or I may disagree with on personal issues or on social values, who I just really like. And that's been one of the really kind of amazing things about this trip is, I started in Virginia, I drove to Nashville, I drove to Arkansas, and there's this horse farm, this horse rescue in Arkansas run by this LA actress. And so the people there are really diverse. You have somebody who moved down from Alaska. You have other people who grew up in Arkansas. And everybody has very different experiences. What I found is I like everybody there. And we have conversations. I tend to stay away from certain topics because people will get, kind of inflamed or enraged about things. I'm like, yeah, I don't need to do that. In Oklahoma, I'm driving through and I find this campground that this guy moved from Seattle to buy. And he and I had probably very different political views, but I really liked the guy. Like, I liked what he believed in. I liked that he moved his family here because he wanted them to have a space that felt like home, that felt more than just like this kind of busy city where he was worried about his kids on the street. It just, everything that I've met, and I don't necessarily like people's certain views. There are definitely certain people that I like who they say something or do something. I'm just like, hey, like, I don't like that, or I don't feel comfortable with that, or I don't like the way that makes me feel to hear that. And a lot of times I'll just talk about that. When I don't really know somebody, I won't necessarily. But on the other hand, when I don't know anybody, it's nothing to lose. Like, what, if you're never going to talk to me again? Well, I'd never talked to you before today, so it's not such a big deal. But again, what I found is that if I give people the space to talk about whatever it is they believe or whatever they need to unburden themselves with, whatever they're feeling, whatever their fear is, that once they feel seen to do that, we can actually have a conversation. Where if before we start, I'm just like, you're wrong because of this, and you need to do this. And yeah, there's no conversation. They go into defensiveness and they go back in that automatic habit mode. But what I found is that the most substantial, like, shifting conversations that I've had with people, most online, but some in person, have been just by saying, hey, help me understand, like, why you believe this, or like, tell me what your concern is. Like, what is your biggest fear? Or what is it that you value? Everybody wants the same thing. They want to, like, be safe. They want their family to be safe. They want to be okay. They want to not worry about the future. They want all these things. And we go about it in different ways, or we have different, specific things that we fear. When we find that, I mean, we really are so much more alike than we are different, despite all the rhetoric. And I think that the rhetoric and the divide really comes from not having those conversations, not having proximity, which allows us to start demonizing people that we don't talk to. Whereas we talk to him and be like, oh, Joe, like, he might have done this, but like, he's actually kind of a nice guy. Or, so-and-so that like agrees with me is actually kind of a prick. Like, we're all people. And I do think that it requires proximity. Brian Stevenson, who's a lawyer who wrote Just Mercy, did amazing work on death row. He talks about that. He said the only solution to any problem comes with proximity. If you don't bring things and people together, it's not going to change.
Yeah. Communication is how we change. Storytelling. I always talk about the power of storytelling on here and just on my page in general. And you're a storyteller. That's like how you've built what you've built. Like, you're a great storyteller. And so you can't do that separated. Otherwise, you're just talking to an echo chamber in many ways, and that doesn't achieve anything. I think I'll put my own self on blast a little bit within this. I think I put myself in an echo chamber over the last 3 months during this whole post-DNC era. In many ways, I was like very ingrained in that group that we were all with. And I was like, yeah, we're killing it. And then lo and behold, We were not, in fact, killing it. We were just doing the bare minimum. And I think a lot of it is because so many people were not having the tough conversations with people to try to understand what exactly they would need. And I think that we can be critical of party members as well for not listening to people and their concerns and addressing those in a timely fashion or in a direct enough fashion. I think there's a lot that can be said on both sides for this. I think I would love to see us to get to a place where we can have fruitful conversations that bring a level of, maybe we're not going to change each other's minds, but like some level of respect and decorum, because I feel like we've lost that at the time. We really have as a nation.
And I mean, I understand, because it feels like, I think it was artificially created years ago where, oh, well, this is unforgivable, so we can't cross this line, we can't have this conversation. I think now there are some things or some policies or some issues that I understand why people are like, this is a hard line for me, I will not cross, I will not talk to somebody about this. But I think that the trick is, or the point is, that we have to be willing to understand what's underneath of that. Like, what is it underneath of that policy? Or what is it underneath of that viewpoint? How do you get to that point? Because nobody wakes up in the morning and just like wants to be hateful and wants to like destroy half the planet or wants any of the things we accuse other people of being, unless they're in pain, unless they're afraid, unless they're suffering. Like, and if there's that thing there, can we address that? Can we talk about that? Because what I found is when you alleviate the kind of pain or you alleviate the suffering, well, the hatefulness and the you know, kind of malice goes away because it's no longer being driven by this thing underneath. It's just the same as like, it's, I guess one of the reasons that I'm critical of some like programs of recovery, because people will be like, oh, well, I'm not doing this thing anymore. Like, I'm not a sex addict anymore. I'm not doing heroin anymore. And it's like, cool, but like that thing that drove you to do that in the first place is still there. And if you're not addressing that, well, nothing's really going to change. Like, yeah, you're not doing that, and that's great because that's obviously bad. But like, when can we get to the root of this? And that's how I see every person who leaves a trolling comment on the internet, everybody who leaves some hateful thing on the news, everybody who makes some hateful statement, like, hey, something's going on inside. And if we can figure out what that is and we can try to help heal that, the outside stuff will go away, or it'll at least shift forms.
100%. I think you said that so beautifully, because that is the thing, right? And I always see it like with disability issues, a lot of it's coming from a place of fear. A lot of people have a lot of fear around becoming disabled themselves. A lot of people have a lot of fear about the idea of like living in a broken body or whatever that may be. So much so that like there's TV shows and movies and books about ending it all because suddenly you're in a wheelchair or whatever. And it's so often, if we can address the fear, if we can address the root problem, I think a lot of the hate, as you put it, goes away. A lot of the fear goes away. A lot of insert whatever here. So I think that is really, really key. And it's something that's not, it takes listening. It takes having conversations, because how else are you going to figure out what the root problem is?
Yeah. And it's hard because this was the thing in prison is like, definitely I would never hold prison up as like an elevated atmosphere. It was anything but. But there was this thing of like trying to understand, but also have boundaries, which is like, hey, I want to understand what's going on in your life, but also you can't do this. Like, you can't cross this line. And one of the interesting things is I think it's an old Heinlein quote. He said, an armed society is a polite society. And that's the truth. Like, prison was a really polite society. Like, there was way more courtesy and awareness and consideration of other people there than I see out here in the world, because yeah, somebody's going to punch you in the face. And I don't think that's a good thing, but it's like, how do we set boundaries that are firm, that don't allow people to tread on us? But how do we then also understand what's going on underneath? Like, how do we stop, but also how do we then, you know, address the underlying issues and not just contribute to it with like violence or more rhetoric or more hate? It's a puzzle, and I haven't figured it out, but it is interesting to see the dynamics of people out here in the world, because a lot of people say things that they would never say in person because they're behind a keyboard or because they feel like they have safety in numbers or safety in a group. And then when consequences come, you know, they're really surprised or they're really offended or they're really bothered. And it's kind of like, well, you did say something terrible and somebody punched you in the face. Like, that's kind of a natural outcome. Like, how do we come to the point of making all those things work together?
Yes, I think that's so true. And like these keyboard people who like to just type before they think, they feel safety. Because they don't have to deal with the consequences of that. They put in 2 seconds worth of time to make a statement, and then it disappears into the abyss of the internet. And then somebody feels like garbage about it who's reading it on the other side, but the person that wrote it is probably already writing 10 more comments somewhere else. So it is kind of you don't see the consequences of it.
But I was going to say the comments that I most like to engage with are the shitty ones. Like when somebody says something really terrible, if it's in any way like intelligent, if it's just like a tagline or it's just, but usually you're not going to get anywhere. But the number of people that I've managed to have conversations with after they've said something terrible of like, hey, like help me understand what's going on. Like you're leaving shitty comments all the time. Like, are you okay? Like, do you need anything? Like this is offline. Like nobody's ever going to know your name. Like what is going on? And there's one person I can think of in particular. He used to always do that. And now I get a message. He's out in California. And every time I'm out there, he's like, hey, man, come see me. Love to buy you a coffee. Like, let's hang out. And it went from just like being angry at the world because nobody was listening. And so I was a target of that because I'm, for whatever reason, representative of something that's not fair, to then, hey, you're the guy who listened to me. Like, you're the guy who asked if I was okay. You're the guy who asked, what I needed. So yeah, I want to be around you. And it's just, we don't have enough outreach. So we have people who are just in their miserable little spot, just getting worse and worse and kind of festering like a wound. And sometimes all it takes is outreach. Sometimes all it takes is being like, hey, I know you said something really shitty, but like, what's going on, man? You okay? Like, you want to go get a cup of coffee? You want to go for a walk? Like, you want to talk about this? And it's really cool to be able to see that.
That is really cool. What a way to engage with your audience, because that takes some power on your behalf. And I want to like give you your flowers for that, because I definitely couldn't do that. Well, I don't want to say that I couldn't do that, but I don't. Like if somebody's being garbage, usually I just hit the block button. I'm like, I'm done. Thank you. Thank you for your time. With peace and love. See you never. But that is in many ways, like you're inspiring me, I think, to maybe not like necessarily do that exactly, but just have a bit more grace, I think, and understanding and empathy, like that, hey, this maybe not coming from somewhere else. What I will say is I really find it fruitful to have conversation when somebody brings up like, hey, you're wrong. Like they'll tell me like I'm wrong about something, and I'll be like, actually, here's where I got that information, and try to enter into a conversation in that way. And I think that has been fruitful for me, not just like during the election cycle, but like prior to that, because I've been doing advocacy work for years now in the disability space. And I think that has been the most easy way to connect with people in a way that I'm like, okay, maybe I can change this. Maybe I can help elaborate and educate in this capacity. Because as long as you do it with respect and you're not coming from like a condescending place, which I think I definitely can get to because I get sassy sometimes. But like I've tried historically not to do that. I think that's important.
It's hard because there's absolutely nothing wrong with just saying, I'm going to block this. I don't need this in my life. There are some things that I just don't want to see or I don't want to listen to. I think it's a matter of like, what is that balance, or like what do we have the resources to deal with? I think for me though, it's almost been like exposure therapy, because so many of the things that bothered me in the beginning were the things that I was insecure about. And it would be like somebody would leave a comment like, you never should have been let out. Like, you don't deserve this. And like deep down, I didn't feel like I deserved to get out. I felt like I deserved to be in prison for 30 years. And so hearing that would really trigger me, and I would get defensive or I would get angry because I was afraid they were right, because I was afraid that I wasn't good enough. I was afraid I wasn't redeemable. And so engaging with those comments helped me kind of slowly get through like, okay, this is how I feel. Like, yeah, hey, I feel like that sometimes too. And there's no better way to end an argument than when somebody's yelling at you and you're like, yeah, I agree with you. And they're like, what the fuck? Like, what do we do now? Like, how do we argue if he's agreeing with us? But also it's really helped me then recognize like where my stuff ends and somebody else's stuff begins. Because it's just like if somebody comes up rambling nonsense at you, you're not going to take any of that on. There's no need to, maybe you'd block them just because they're rambling, but like you don't internalize it. But it's like, okay, when it does bother me, when it does go inside, like what is it that I'm not addressing in myself? What is it that I can deal with? What is it I can process, or start to try to just look at it in a different way? And so in a weird way, it's a blessing to have somebody spew, nonsense that actually offends me, because I'm like, oh, well, why does this offend me? Or why does it bother me? Or what is my insecurity? What can I actually work on?
That is so powerful, because when somebody brings up insecurities within you, that it can really, really trigger something. I hate that I'm going to get wonderful within you. It can kind of, because it causes reflection. It causes you to be then like, what is it? Why is it here? How do I deal with it? That's therapy 101. You have to understand. And in a way, if they're bringing it up and making you think about it, they're taking some of the work out of you for having to seek it out yourself. I know, like, within my divorce, I haven't talked about the ending of it very publicly in any capacity yet, but here we go. Just for a quick little anecdote, uh, there was a lot of things thrown at me in those final moments, like as we were like realizing that this was going to be the end here, and almost every single one of them was like, you don't make enough money, your job's not important, like you're disabled, like all of these things that I've already had insecurities about. And I was like, oh. And so then it made therapy a lot easier because I knew exactly like, okay, well, all of these things that I was already feeling weird about that I didn't realize I was feeling weird about now have been brought to the surface, and here we are. So I think that like I said, it's weird to say that it's wonderful when somebody calls it out in a way, but it does, it leads to the process of dealing with your own internal stuff.
Completely agree.
Well, Jesse, we are nearing the end of our time, and I want to be mindful of that because I know you have so many things to do, and you're going to continue traveling, you said, here very soon, right?
I am. I'm excited about it. And today is, I suck at like work-life balance. So I'm trying to like make myself like yesterday I didn't do anything. And today it's Veterans Day. I had this and I have a couple meetings later, but I'm trying to go see my buddy. And like I sold him my motorcycle when I left because I couldn't take it and my car with me. But like I get to go ride my old motorcycle, and I'm like, this is what I need. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go out. I've got kind of like adopted family. I'm going to go have lunch with them, and I'm just going to have a wonderful fall day and pretend that I don't need to like be obsessed about things. And hopefully that'll work. But probably 6 o'clock tonight I'll be back on the computer and working. But until then, I'm going to enjoy myself.
I hope you do, especially since you got up so early and like had this conversation with me. I also hope the weather is as nice as it is here in Chicago for you today for a fall day out.
It's the last nice day of the year, it seems. So I'm going to enjoy it for all I can.
Oh my God, spend every moment outside. Okay, I have like 4 rapid fire sort of questions for you, and then I will let you get to the outdoors because we are wrapping this up. First question, when you're feeling unmotivated, when you're feeling down or sad or whatever it may be, what is a song that you can listen to that will instantly like boost your mood a little bit?
I don't know that there are 2 answers to that. One is I often don't want to boost my mood. I want to like just go deep dive into that. So like Brandy Carlisle or like Kesha's Praying or like some of these just like power ballads that just like are guaranteed to like make me cry. Like I want that. Alternatively, like if I just need to get ready, I have this like playlist. It's just like it's Rage Against the Machine, Chappell Roan, and like some other random pop like playlist that is just like I need something that's going to confuse my brain so I don't ever get comfortable, because you can get comfortable in the music and you just kind of like stay there. But I'm like, what is happening? Okay, I'm awake. I'm doing stuff. Like I'm engaged. So yeah, that random workout playlist it spans the gamut. That usually helps me.
What can you name one song on it? Just like what Chappell Roan song or whatever is on there?
Oh, literally the entire Chappell Roan playlist. But like Pink Pony, so actually the person whose house I'm at right now introduced me to Femininomenon, or Femininomenon. So we were on our way to jujitsu, and she was like, "Hold on, let me play this," and I was like, "What the F is this? This is amazing." I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to like this as much as I like it. And I just put it on, like that whole album, I put it on repeat over and over and over for like a week. Finally, some guy got in my car. He's like, bro, are you okay? Like, this is the second time this is played through. I was like, yeah, I know. It's great.
Wait, that's epic. Oh, Chappell's so good like that.
I agree.
The reason I ask, I'm making a playlist of all of these like songs that everybody says. So I'm like, what can I like specifically include, I guess. But yeah. And we can have multiple. I can add multiple from an episode, but I just wanted to ask if there was one specific. So.
But I feel like those have been taken. Like, I'm pretty sure some of your guests have already said that because she is just like rapping the world. Really?
Nobody has said her, and only one person has said Taylor Swift. So I've been like shook by
you have
both
like an
of
indie
them.
audience. Look at this. Okay.
Everybody said something like I've never heard before, and it's been very interesting adding to my music repertoire.
Well, add Brandy Carlisle then. That would be my suggestion. Brandy Carlisle, the joke or the story. I just listened to her book on tape as I was driving. Probably my favorite artist of all time. Just like stunning.
Okay, I will look it up after this is done because I will be listening to music this afternoon. Question 2, Rejection Rescue Kit. What's in yours? What's something that you do or something that you have that like helps you when you've been told no?
If I'm gonna wallow, I never watch TV. but when I wallow, I'll watch TV. Like yesterday, I finished the Silo series. I don't even know when I started it. I was just like, oh, this is on a thing and a place that I don't live anymore. Ice cream helps, or rotisserie chicken from Costco, because if I'm doing bad, I judge how bad I'm doing by how much of the chicken I eat. Like if I eat the whole thing, I know it was truly a bad day. If I eat a wing, I'm like, all right, I was doing okay. If I get like 3/4 of the way through, I was like, cool. This is a rough one. Like this is on the scale. It might need some help. Might need to call a friend. Might need to take a nap. Yeah. So that's my meter of just how messed up it is.
That's a great a great way to judge a good um qualifying scale. That's so great. What flavor of ice cream? Just out of curiosity.
I like everything. Last night I went and got I went to what do you call it? Cold Stone. So I got the coffee ice cream with Oreos and M&Ms and maybe chocolate chips. I was just like, give me everything. Maybe Reese's. I can't remember. But they're just like mixing it all together. And it's not even good at that point. You're just like, I'm going to indulge and I'm just going to take in as many calories in as concentrated form as possible to reward my lizard brain, because it recognizes that this means I need rewarding, and I'm going to be okay.
Oh my God, that sounds so good. I've not had ice cream in a really long time, I feel like. So now you're inspiring me. Maybe I'll go get Ben and Jerry's or something tonight.
There you go.
There we go. What is the last thing that you did scared?
Drive across the country. I mean, I think September 1st leaving was definitely something I did scared. I just went to New York and applied for a couple of fellowships. I was just a pitch coach and a tech pitch off. I'm meeting with this genomics oncology guy to do the storytelling for his entire company. Yeah, pretty much everything I do. I messed my shoulder up. I really love jujitsu, and I wasn't able to do it for a long time. And I did one time on the road, and then I went yesterday. I was a little bit worried about how my shoulder would be, so I went and did that scared. Yeah, but it's gotten to the point where, I just kind of am used to a low level of anxiety in my life, so it's okay. And in fact, if it was missing, I'd probably be like listening around like crickets, like, what's wrong? What's happening? Why is this not here?
Okay. I like that you labeled so many different things and a variety of things too. I think that shows that, doing things scared isn't just career focused. It's not just like relationship focused. It's not like any specific like bucket of life. It's kind of all over the place. And that's good in some ways. It drives you in a lot of ways. And that's cool. I'm glad your shoulder's okay.
Me too. It hurts a little bit today, but I did go with the giant guy at the end who just like laid on me and crushed me. And I was like, oh. So lesson learned.
Lesson learned. Final little question here for everybody listening to today's episode. What is like one final nugget of wisdom that you would like to leave with them all? Something just generally speaking, like doesn't even have to deal with anything that we talked about. It can be something completely separate, whatever you're feeling.
I would say it goes back to what we were talking about of doing it scared. I was in the juvenile center for a year. I was working with the kids, and what I consistently saw was the biggest barrier wasn't the external, it was their failure of imagination. It was their belief that what I've seen is all there is, that these are my only options, and I can get out, I can do X, Y, and Z. That's why we started bringing in community members and leaders to say, hey, I've been where you are, but like now I run a company. I have one guy who lives in Colombia right now. He's like, hey, I went from like the streets of Richmond to like, I live in Colombia and run a tech company and make a bunch of money. And they're like, what the? So yeah, not letting that failure of imagination, not letting us believe that just because something hasn't been done, it's not possible, not letting us believe that only other people or special people can do those things that we want to do or be in those places that we want to be. That if there's a thing we want to do or the place we want to be or a role we want to play, we can do it. It may take a lot of work. It may be hard. It may have a lot of no's, but like if we do that, if we actually move in that direction, we're actually going to get the thing that we want.
Thank you so much for not only being here, for sharing that as well. That was like really powerful. And I hope everybody heard it and like can take that and leave this episode feeling empowered to go out there and like create your life, man. Surround yourself with the good people and go out and do your thing. Not be afraid, do it scared. And yeah, Jesse, thank you so much for being here. Can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure. You can use my name, Jesse Crosson, or Second Chancer, CHANCER, on pretty much anything, I think, like TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. And I've got a website, and we have Second Chancer Foundation if you want to support mentorship for incarcerated people. And yes, I'm sure I will see you as I'm driving across the country again, and we will sit down and have a conversation, whether you, Jessica, or the random person listening, and it'll be great.
It'll be so great. Everybody, everything's going to be linked down below, so be sure to check that out. Jesse, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you have a great rest of your travels. Congratulations on all of your accomplishments. I'm so lucky to know you and like be able to call you a friend now. So thank you so much. You're killing it. You're killing it.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Bye. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Access Denied. New episodes launch every Tuesday, so I hope that you will subscribe, download, whatever you do to make sure you're here every single week. We have so many incredible guests coming on, and I want to say a huge shout out to JP Warner Sound for dropping this sick beat that you're listening to right now. Thanks to everybody who made Access Denied possible, and I will see you next time. Bye!